everyone. Thank you for joining the session. I'm Amulya from IBM and here to share about what's been happening with the project Cluster API Provider for IBM Cloud, that is CAPIBM. First, any quick show of hands if anybody has heard of the project Cluster API? Well, quite a few. Thank you. So CAPIBM, it's an extension of the project Cluster API. So firstly, what does the project Cluster API do? It's a sub-project of SIG Cluster Lifecycle, which provides a declarative way of managing your clusters, that is provisioning, upgrading, and deleting them. Basically, it automates your cluster lifecycle management using controllers. So we have the concept of a management cluster and workload clusters, where the workload clusters are going to get created on a specific cloud platform or any infrastructure provider, and you'll have the management cluster that's going to handle all these workload clusters. Cluster API provides support for various infrastructure providers, to name a few: AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. One such infrastructure provider is IBM Cloud, hence CAPIBM. A short recap on our journey so far. The CAPIBM project, it basically supports provisioning Kubernetes clusters on two IBM offerings, IBM Cloud VPC and IBM Power Virtual Servers on two different architectures. It supports two API versions, as you can see, and Cluster API, the parent project comes up with features from time to time which can be leveraged by the infrastructure providers to make the cluster provisioning more efficient. So we make use of most of them. For example, we have a feature like machine health check, which helps scale the node based on certain health conditions on the machines. And also, we have used the autoscaler tool feature by Capi to handle utilization respectively based on the workload on the clusters. We also have external cloud provider support using Cloud Controller Manager, CCM. We have a CLI tool, CAPIBM ADM, which can be utilized to help create any resources that are needed for cluster creation or for any operations the user needs. Our latest release is 0.9, and with a few major features that went in are, we improved the cluster provisioning for the PowerVS cluster provisioning by adding load balancer capabilities, and also added multiple features to the VPC cluster provisioning. So what's in store next? Here are some interesting things lined up. We already have support for collecting metrics which we leverage from the parent project Cluster API, but it would be good to add instrumentation in terms of tracing, because it will help us understand our controller better and find ways where we can optimize them. There's also an enhancement on how can we add additional disks to the node in the cluster rather than expanding the existing machine size. So similar to what we have discussed earlier, as we can utilize features from the parent project Cluster API, managed cluster is one among them, which we want to explore, where the control plane is managed by the cloud service provider. And so yeah, Cluster API also works on modifying some of its APIs, so that is something which the infrastructure providers will have to keep up with and also accommodate to it. And lastly, we plan to leverage the IBM Cloud features that are relevant to cluster creation. So with the buzz around security and confidentiality, one thing to look for is the secure boot feature available for VPC, which makes sure that you can truly trust your machines to run your workloads. Lastly, here's more information on how to get involved. We are an active community. You can check out our repository with the name Cluster API Provider IBM Cloud, and also join our Slack channel on the Kubernetes Slack. You can join the community meeting, which happens on every other Tuesday at 10 a.m. IST. Yeah, with that we come to an end. Thank you, everyone.